Okay, so today we're going to do a deep dive on Natalie Portman.
Yeah, it's good.
We've got this great article about her, and I think it'll be really interesting to kind of go beyond just like the basic stuff that everybody knows about her, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Like when you really dig into her career, it's pretty remarkable how much she's accomplished and all the different paths she's taken.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really stands out to me is how young she was when she first started acting. Like, think about Léon, the professional. I mean, she was only 12 years old when she filmed that.
Right. And apparently her parents weren't even sure about letting her take the role at first because of the film's content.
Yeah, that's what I read too. It's crazy to think about, like, most kids at that age are worried about, like, what's for lunch or, you know, what their friends are up to.
Exactly. But she was already taking on really intense and challenging roles. It just shows you how driven and passionate she was even back then.
And that movie really launched her career and became this cult classic and put her on the map. Yeah.
And then from there, she went on to star in these huge blockbusters like Star Wars. It's like she went from this indie darling to a global superstar almost overnight.
But even with all that success, she didn't just settle into a comfortable niche. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. She could have easily ridden the Star Wars wave for years, but she chose to take on more complex and demanding roles, like Closer, for example.
That's a great example. It was such a different kind of film compared to Star Wars. It was much more intimate and emotional. And her performance in it.
It really showed her range of acting. And I think that's one of the things that makes her so
And she's not afraid to take risks, even when those risks lead to criticism. Like, remember all the backlash she got for her performance in the Star Wars prequels?
Oh, yeah, I remember. Some people were really harsh in their critiques of her acting in those films.
It would have been easy for her to let that negativity get to her. But instead, she was very cool.
It's almost like she took those criticisms as a challenge to prove that she was capable of something. And she definitely did that with Black Swan.
Oh my gosh, Black Swan. That role was transformative. It required so much of her, both physically and emotionally. She won an Oscar for it.
It's amazing to think that she went from being criticized for her acting to winning an Oscar in just a few years. It's a testament to her talent and her resilience.
You have to wonder if her background in psychology played a role in her ability to delve so deeply into that character's psyche.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
She did graduate from Harvard with a degree in psychology, and she's even given talks at universities like Columbia and Yale.
Hold on, I almost forgot to mention this. She's also fluent in a bunch of languages. Hebrew, French, Japanese, German. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Seriously, it just adds another layer to her already impressive resume. It makes you wonder how she finds the time to do it all.
It speaks to a level of discipline and curiosity that's pretty rare, I think. It's like she's constantly challenging herself to learn and grow in all aspects of her life.
And that's something that I find really inspiring about her. She's not content to just rest on her laurels. She's always striving to be better and to do more with her life.
And she's using her platform to make a real difference in the world, too. She's a producer, a director, a children's book author. She's involved in all sorts of projects that extend far beyond that.
Let's not forget her activism. She's been a vocal advocate for a wide range of causes, from gender equality to animal rights. It's clear that she's committed to using her voice to make a positive impact.
Which brings us to Thor, Love and Thunder. I mean, who would have thought the same woman who played Star Wars would end up playing Mighty Thor in the Marvel Universe?
It's pretty wild when you think about it. It just shows how versatile she is as an actress and how willing she is to take on new challenges.
She's not afraid to reinvent herself and to try new things, and that's something I think we can all learn from.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we should never be afraid to step outside of our comfort zones and to explore new possibilities.
And that even with all her success and accomplishments, she's still evolving and pushing herself to grow.
Which is really exciting to see. I can't wait to see what she does next.
Me too. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about some of the controversies that have surrounded her career. Because let's face it, she hasn't been immune to criticism.
You're right. Controversy can be a tricky thing to navigate, especially when you're someone as high profile as Natalie Portman.
It's like the more successful you are, the more scrutiny you face.
Yeah.
And the more likely you are to ruffle some feathers along the way.
And Natalie Portman has definitely ruffled some feathers over the years.
Especially with her outspoken views on feminism and her critiques of Hollywood.
She's not afraid to speak her mind, even if it means making people uncomfortable. And that's something I really admire about her.
Remember that moment at the 2020 Oscars when she wore that cape embroidered with the names of female directors who were snubbed by the Academy?
Oh, yeah. That was a really bold statement. And it definitely sparked a lot of debate.
Some people praised her for using her platform to highlight the lack of female representation in Hollywood. Others criticized it as being a symbolic gesture that didn't go far enough.
It's interesting how even a seemingly simple act, like wearing a cape, can generate such a complex and nuanced conversation.
It just shows you how deeply people care about you and how important it is to have these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable.
And Natalie Portman is definitely something you want to have.
She's not afraid to challenge the status quo. So, talk about her early success, her willingness to take risks, her activism, and even some of the controversies that have surrounded her career.
It's clear that Natalie Portman
She's a complex, multifaceted
What was really fascinating was that it was very public persona, very
Yeah, it's like she's managed to maintain a sense of mystery and intrigue, even though she's been in the spotlight for decades.
It makes you wonder, who is the real Natalie Portman? What's she like when the cameras are off?
That's a great question, and one that we'll try to explore as we continue our deep dive into her life.
It's really interesting how she's managed to keep so much of her life private in this age of social media and constant living.
It's almost like she's defying the expectations of what it means to be a celebrity in the 21st century.
Like she's not trying to be an influencer or constantly seeking validation through likes and followers.
Right. It's more like she's using her platform to shine a light on the things that are important to her and to use her voice to advocate for change.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes her so respected. She's not just famous for being famous. She's using her fame to make a difference in the world.
And she's not afraid to take a stand, even when it means facing criticism.
That's right. She's not afraid to ruffle some feathers and to challenge the status quo.
Like with that Oscars moment we were just talking about with Kate.
Yeah, that was a really powerful statement. And it definitely got people talking.
It made you think about the lack of opportunities for female directors in Hollywood and the systemic biases that still exist.
And it also sparked a conversation about what it means to be a true ally and whether symbolic gestures are enough to create real change.
Right, because some people argued that while it was a nice gesture, it didn't actually address the root causes.
Exactly. They felt like it was more about making a statement than about taking concrete action to make a difference.
And it's interesting how that one moment can reveal so much about how we approach these complex issues.
It's like it forced us to confront our own biases and to examine how we can be better.
And it also highlights the importance of having these difficult conversations, even when they're uncomfortable.
Because that's how we learn and grow.
So let's delve a little deeper into that Oscar. What were the specific arguments on both sides of that debate?
Well, on the one hand, you had people who praised Portman for using her platform to bring attention to an important issue.
They saw it as a courageous act of solidarity with female filmmakers, who are often overlooked and undervalued.
Exactly. They felt like she was amplifying their voices and using her privilege to shine a light on a systemic problem.
But then there were others who felt like it wasn't enough.
They argued that Hollywood is full of performative activism, where celebrities make grand gestures without actually doing the work to create real change.
So they saw Portman's cape as a symbolic gesture that didn't actually address the underlying issues.
Right. They felt like true allyship requires more than just wearing a statement piece. It requires taking concrete action to dismantle the systems of oppression that marginalize women and other underrepresented groups.
It's like the difference between talking the talk and walking the walk.
Exactly. And I think it's an important distinction to make because real change doesn't happen overnight. It requires sustained effort and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
And it also requires us to be open to feedback and to be willing to learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely. Because none of us are perfect, and we're all on a journey of learning and growth.
So even though there were valid criticisms of Portman's actions, I think it's important to acknowledge her willingness to speak out and to use her platform to advocate for change.
I agree. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, but it takes courage to stand up and speak your truth, especially when you know you're going to face backlash.
And I think it's also important to remember that she's just one person.
Right. She can't single-handedly solve all the problems in Hollywood, but she can use her voice to raise awareness and to inspire others to take action.
And that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's commendable.
It is. And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable world.
So what do you think? What's the biggest takeaway from this whole Oscars cape situation?
I think it's the importance of having these difficult conversations and of being willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases.
And to be open to learning from each other, even when we disagree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's how we grow and evolve and create a better world for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about the Oscars cape and the debate surrounding it, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about her career more broadly.
Sure.
What would you like to focus on?
Well, I'm curious about her decision to return to the Marvel Universe after all these years. What do you think motivated her to take on the role of Mighty Thor?
I think there were probably a few factors at play. One is that it's a chance for her to revisit a character she enjoyed playing, but in a completely new way.
Right, because she's not just reprising her role as Jane Foster. She's becoming Mighty Thor.
Exactly. It's a chance for her to showcase her physicality and her strength in a way that she hasn't really been able to do before.
And it's also a chance for her to be a part of a franchise that's incredibly popular and that has a huge global audience.
I'm sure that's a factor too. It's not like she needs the exposure, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
But I think there's also something deeper going on here.
What do you mean?
Well, I think she's sending a message by taking on this role.
What kind of message? A message about female empowerment and about the fact that women can be just as strong and powerful as men.
I think you're right. It's a subtle message, but it's definitely there.
And it's a message that's especially important in today's world where women are still fighting for equality.
Absolutely. And I think it's great that she's using her platform to amplify that message.
And to inspire young girls to believe that they can achieve anything they set their minds to.
Exactly, because representation matters. And when girls see women like Natalie Portman kicking ass on screen, it sends a powerful message about what's possible.
So I think her decision to play Mighty Thor is more than just a career move. It's a statement about who she is and what she believes in.
I agree. And I think it's a really positive statement.
Okay, so we've talked about her activism, her career choices, and her decision to return to the Marvel Universe. But there's one more thing I want to touch on.
What's that?
Her personal life.
Yes, the great mystery.
Because for someone who's been in the public eye for so long, she's managed to keep her private life incredibly private.
It's true. We know she's married to Benjamin Millepied and that they have 2 children together, but that's about it.
Yeah, she's not one to share personal details on social media or to air her dirty laundry in public.
And I think that's a testament to her strength and her integrity. She's chosen to keep those parts of her life sacred, and I respect that.
Me too. It's a reminder that even celebrities are entitled to privacy and that they don't owe us every detail of their lives.
And it also makes her more relatable in a way.
How so?
Well, it shows that she's a real person with a real life outside of Hollywood.
Right. She's not just this glamorous movie star. She's a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend.
Exactly. And I think that makes her more human and more likable.
It's like we can see glimpses of her humanity shining through even amidst all the fame and fortune.
And I think that's what makes her so captivating. She's not just a pretty face or a talented actress.
Right.
She's a complex and multifaceted individual who's using her platform to make a positive impact on the world.
And she's doing it all while staying true to herself and to her values.
It's really inspiring.
It is. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into Natalie Portman's life and career, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Natalie Portman is more than just a Hollywood star.
She's a role model for women, for activists, and for anyone who wants to use their platform to make a difference in the world.
She's a reminder that we can be both successful and compassionate, both outspoken and private, both strong and vulnerable.
And that we should never be afraid to speak our truth and to fight for what we believe in.
Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Yeah. And it's interesting how those controversies often kind of force us to look at things from different angles.
Like they make you question your own assumptions and biases.
Exactly. And in Portman's case, those criticisms didn't really stop her from speaking out.
Right. It's almost like she understands that real change requires being willing to make people uncomfortable sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's not always easy, especially when you're in the public eye.
But it's so important.
Yeah.
And it's something I really admire about her. Me too. Okay, so let's circle back to that Oscars moment with the cape for a second.
Yeah, I think it's worth revisiting. Because it wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a very deliberate act of protest.
Right. Each name on that cape represented a female director who was overlooked by the Academy that year.
Like Greta Gerwig for Little Women.
Yeah, and Lulu Wang, who directed The Farewell.
Oh, and Marielle Heller. She did A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Exactly. All incredibly talented filmmakers who didn't get the recognition they deserved.
It's mind-boggling when you think about it, and it really highlights the systemic biases that women face in Hollywood.
Absolutely. And Portman's decision to wear that cape was a way of saying, hey, look at these women. They're doing amazing work, and they're not getting the credit they deserve.
It was a powerful visual statement, but as we mentioned before, not everyone saw it that way.
Right. There were some who accused her of being hypocritical.
Because her own production company hadn't worked with many female directors up to that point.
Exactly. So there was this disconnect between her words and her actions.
And that's a valid criticism, I think, because it's easy to talk about equality, but it's much harder to actually put it into practice.
Absolutely. But to Portman's credit, she didn't shy away from that criticism.
Yeah, she actually acknowledged it publicly and said she had a lot to learn.
Which is pretty remarkable, I think, because a lot of celebrities would have just ignored the criticism or tried to defend themselves.
But she owned up to her mistakes and pledged to do better in the future.
And I think that's a really important lesson for all of us.
That it's okay to make mistakes as long as we're willing to learn from them.
And to be open to feedback and to be willing to change our behavior.
Because true allyship is an ongoing process. It's not about being perfect. It's about constantly striving to be better.
I think that's a great way to put it. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Natalie Portman's life and career, what do you think is the biggest takeaway?
Well, I think it's that she's a really complex and fascinating individual.
Definitely. She's someone who's constantly pushing boundaries and challenging expectations.
And she's using her platform to make a real difference in the world, whether it's through her activism, her career choices, or even just the way she lives her life.
I think she's a great example of how to use your fame and influence for good.
And she's a reminder that we all have a voice and that we can all make a difference.
Even if it's just in our own small way.
So yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to end our deep dive today. Thanks for joining me. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Of course. It was my pleasure.